You can call me Dr. Joanna or yes.
Dr. Joanna. Okay, great. Well, as you know, my name is Dean.
Yes. Nice to meet you, Dean.
Yes. And so tell me a little bit more about your background.
Okay, so this is an interesting question because at the moment and for last many years actually, I live in Australia, in the subtropical part in Australia with my husband and with our dog. But I'm actually originally from Poland, and I left Poland after the first year of university. I studied philosophy, and I left because, it was a communist Poland, but it was not just the system, although it has taught me a lot about what's going on at the moment in the world. It was also, just a desire to explore the world. I am a very curious person. And I follow this desire. I always had a sense of a mission, being on a mission, and even if I didn't know sometimes what the mission was, now I think I know. But, it's quite late in my life. But before I just knew that I have a mission. So I made this courageous, I think, choice because first I went to Sweden. Then I had to come back. Then I went to Paris and I went with, I'm not sure if it was 10 or 20 American dollars. I don't remember anymore. And a borrowed suitcase because, this is all we're allowed to exchange then in Poland for foreign currency to discourage people from leaving. So, and not only, and, I met wonderful people. So I don't know, somebody was looking over me. Yeah, because I was a very young woman. And then when it was time to leave Paris, because my destination was always, actually North America. And I originally wanted to go to the United States, but I was not allowed to. So I ended up in Canada, which I actually loved very much because there I was meant to be there because I studied at the University of Toronto. They immediately accepted me. And I have 3 degrees from the University of Toronto, including master's degree from the Pontifical Institute, which is a branch of the Vatican at the University of Toronto, which gave me an access to many ancient manuscripts and so on. And then I traveled around the world. I taught in Asia, and I was headhunted by the Monash University in Australia in Melbourne, and I was offered to do a PhD with them for free. So it was a proposition I couldn't reject, especially that I rejected a proposal to do a PhD at the University of Toronto, and I decided, A, I was too exhausted, B, I was tired of being poor, as a student. And C, I wanted to discover the world again, not just be locked away in the library. So when I was in Malaysia teaching at a Canadian pre-university program, Monash University from Australia contacted me and offered me, just do a PhD, offered me a job. They said, do a PhD. And it is as a part of a staff, I was a staff member, so it was for free.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, I guess it is meant, to be. So I did my PhD. And then, really my spiritual journey started here. And I was initiated to a esoteric tradition. And then when I thought that I had it all and I had a very deep spiritual experiences, I was asked by 2 men to go to Jerusalem because they thought they discovered some sites related to Jesus and to write a book about it. And then I was introduced to the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and Gnostic teachings of early Christianity. So it was already 20 years ago. And since then, I've been studying the Gospel of Mary Magdalene for 20 years, over 20 years now. And for this book, Alien Goddess, I also studied Pistis Sophia, which is a very complex work. And I know that I was asked to do this and that somebody from above was helping me, because Pistis Sophia is actually an impossible work to study and understand. And I was just basically told, like a download, what it is all about. So I was just basically completely a tool for all of this. So this is pretty much my story, I would think, which now culminates with Alien Goddess, which was published about 2 months ago. And I wrote it in 16 months as I was working full time and doing other things, basically getting downloads and asked to do research about this, do research about this, do research about that. And I just followed this very powerful inner voice. And now I feel that my mission has been accomplished. It's a very interesting feeling, that everything that I was doing in my life, just following my intuition, actually led to that. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So it is an interesting feeling, and it also invites an kind of spiritual opening, because I don't know, maybe this is it. But if not, I'll continue. But I feel like, okay, this is a moment of pause. So I do, I want to share the message of Alien Goddess, and I love doing interviews because it helps me to connect with people. And lots of people write to me about their own experiences, which I love. Obviously they are personal and they're private, so I do not share them unless they want me to. And so I'm in this actually very beautiful state when I think, okay, I have a feeling that my mission has been accomplished, although I wrote other books so I don't know actually what happens now, because people ask me often, so what now? And I say, I don't know. I'm, I'm waiting. Either I get another assignment or I can just continue with my life.
Oh, that's great. Well, I love your book. It was a download for me reading your book. It came to me at a perfect time. It was probably the greatest coincidence that I've had this year in reading your book. I've been wanting to find something, and I've looked for years, online and in books, a basic description of the goddess, right? The divine feminine, that's accessible, that I can actually understand, and that it's accessible, because there's just so much out there and it's very complicated. And you make all of it just absolutely accessible, very simple to understand. The way you walk people through that in your book, I can't recommend it more. It's a wonderful, wonderful explanation of all of that. So I really appreciate you doing the book. And I've got a feeling that, you're just getting started.
Thank you. We will see. But it's a nice place to be, that you are in complete surrender, which is actually not a natural feeling for me, because I'm a very driven person. And suddenly I'm in a complete surrender. But, who knows, right? Thank you for what you have just said, because this book is actually a continuation of my other book, The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge, where I ask myself some questions about the particular archetype of a goddess. And I wondered, I asked myself the question, was it a real person or an entity that was reincarnating through different times, and different cultures? Because I noticed that the same kind of archetypical divine feminine appeared at different times and in different geographical places. Or is it some anomalous experience, or do people channel something? And now I'm quite convinced that the archetype of a goddess did and continue walk, on this planet and trying to guide us and perhaps push us in the right direction, or encourage, because this is a different kind of intelligence, encourages us to go in a particular direction and is watching over us. So this is, I think, very kind of positive in the sense that this presence was always there. And also in my description of a divine feminine, or a goddess, I prefer this term, goddess, is that I want it to be accessible for both women and men, because I do not really agree with this kind of super feminist interpretation of a goddess, because I think that the goddess actually represents a form of consciousness that is available to all of us, and that we have to bring this consciousness back into the forefront, basically, of our lives, because this other form of consciousness that I just happen to call masculine consciousness, and which was also very much needed, was taken to the limit right now, in my opinion, with the development of artificial intelligence and engineering and, this kind of more practical way of thinking. And the reason why I think we have to work on this other form of consciousness, goddess consciousness, and evolve it and bring it to the forefront so it balances the other consciousness. So basically we need both masculine and feminine. But at this moment, I believe that this other form of consciousness, the masculine consciousness, which is very, in this case, it's showing up as an engineering kind of, consciousness, reached its limits without the feminine consciousness. And that's why there is so much confusion about actually what it is all about, what is AI about, and so on. So that's basically my goal, make it goddess accessible for everyone. It's not about being a woman, it's not about being a man, it's not about women against men. I'm completely not interested in that, It is just, this is something that is showing up collectively and individually in our consciousness that wants to be acknowledged. And for some reason, and I hope I am not getting too conspiratorial here, for some reason it's been suppressed for a few thousand years. It was suppressed out of fear, perhaps, or maybe even, there was some agenda, somebody who is not having the good of humanity in mind was suppressing this other form of consciousness and ridiculing it. And I think that it's time to actually honor this.
Yeah. And it starts with awareness.
It starts with awareness. Acknowledging that it was suppressed and it is there and it wants to express itself and that we need it now.
Yes, more than ever, probably. Yeah, especially what's going on with AI. I've got a lot of concerns about that I want to share with you later on as we get into the AI part of it and what I'm seeing myself in regards to that. You'd also talk about initiation, spiritual initiation. You talk about the Eleusinian mysteries, and that's fairly well connected. Basically, the different myths of the goddess are initiation myths.
Yes. But actually, for me, it started with my personal initiation, which was to actually a Hindu esoteric tradition, because I met a spiritual teacher who was conducting this kind of initiation, and I just showed up. I thought that would be interesting. It's funny how destiny, I was already reading a lot because this is who I am, right? Like on esoteric teachings, both of Hinduism and Christianity. But I just show up, and I actually thought it was a yoga class. So I came to a stop in my yoga outfits, Lululemon outfits. And that it was this very complex ritual. And I had a huge awakening in front of a couple of hundreds of people when I had a very deep meditation, because it starts with meditation as some rituals are being performed. And I had a very deep meditation. And then as the teacher who was initiating us to this tradition was coming, to every person and teaching them, touching them on the forehead, to awaken Kundalini energy, I suddenly something amazing happens. I started to feel the movement actually of energy through my body, along my spine. And then suddenly I was thrown out of this. The room expanded infinitely in which we were, then collapsed on me. Then I couldn't stop crying because I saw all the suffering in the world suddenly. And then I couldn't stop laughing right after that because I saw that it was a divine play. And it was quite a performance, but I would never do consciously in front of a couple of hundreds of people. But it was so strong. And then I'm not sure if you're comfortable talking about it later, because I talk about it in my other book. It happened during a tantric experience after the initiation. Are you comfortable talking about it? I'm not going to give...
I have no problem. I have no problem.
Fantastic.
This is an adult audience, so let's hear it.
Fantastic. So because I was also at the stage studied a work by esoteric Indian philosopher from the 10th century who was like, the philosopher of India, so to speak, but he was mostly talking about esoteric traditions of Hinduism and Tantra, which is often misunderstood. Tantra is basically a different way of seeing things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in fact, that everything can be a portal to the divine, including Eros, right? So
who's his name? What was his name? Sorry.
Abhinavagupta.
Abhinavagupta.
Yes.
Okay.
And I talk about him in my previous book, We Are the Goddess. And he wrote this huge book, which I have here on my bookshelf, The Light of Tantra, on Tantra Loka in Sanskrit. And I was very lucky because in the spiritual center, in the ashram, I met a Catholic priest, who had a PhD in Sanskrit and wrote and translated Tantra Loka by Abhinavagupta from Sanskrit.
Wow.
And this is basically the chapter, I forgot which chapter it is at this moment. It was one chapter, but the book is so thick. However, so he translated it, and he invited me, a Swami, Hindu Swami, and a Tibetan Buddhist monk who was a refugee at his center from Tibet, to study this work as he translated it. It was about 20 years ago when it was just translated. However, it is such a dense work. So when we study, so may I just explain, when we study an esoteric work, people do not understand what it is. That's why I call myself spiritual detective, and I'll explain now why and how I realize this. So spiritual detective is someone, in my opinion, who not only studies scholarly the text, sacred text, but actually absorbs the energy of a text. Because there are scholars who just, do everything with proper Sanskrit grammar or Latin grammar, and they have no clue. Like with the Gospel of Magdalene, there's only one person who actually got it, in my opinion, and it's Jean-Yves Leloup, which is a French scholar. And the same with this. So I realized that there are two things. So first of all, that's why I'm a spiritual detective, because I not only study it as a scholar, but I also receive the energy because of my devotional content, with the contact with the text. And also I believe because I was already initiated to an esoteric tradition. Another thing is when you study an esoteric text, because people say, oh, okay, so I will buy a copy of Mary Magdalene or Gospel of Mary Magdalene, or I buy a copy of Tantra Loka. It is that it is written it is written in a different language and difficult to translate, but it is written only the initiates understand.
Right.
So it is encoded. So unless you approach it with complete reverence, and yes, you give it your time and devotion and open to the energy of a text, then you don't get anything about it,
Right.
So the text can initiate you, but it's like every initiation, it's a hard work. You know what I mean? So this is hard work, and that's why I call myself spiritual detective. So anyway, when we're the translator of Tantra Loka, every month we're meeting, I think, for a couple of hours at the priest professor, place. Mm-hmm. Four of us, the people, the Swami, the Buddhist monk, I, and the professor priest, and we're studying the text. So at this stage, I'm happily married now, but at this stage I was dating someone. And after one of the study, I've met with him, and suddenly when we had the erotic encounter, suddenly I had a full-on another awakening of Kundalini energy that I actually, like you see on the paintings, sometimes we meant like the glow.
Oh, right? Yeah.
I was actually like a bulb. And obviously, and not only this energy spilled on the man. So he was in complete awe. like it just was not sexual. It was, so I had this bliss that was also shown in like an aura right around my body that spilled on him. And at the moment, so it's exploded in my heart, then it moved to my forehead or third eye, like in Hindu, esoteric Hinduism. And then it paused for a moment and it was almost like, okay, what's going to happen now? Am I going to do it or not do it? Like it was an intelligence force. So it wasn't like a blind Kundalini that sometimes people have, it was, I could feel its intelligence. Okay. Wow. And it moving through my body, and I had absolutely zero control over this. So for some people it could be scary, but because I studied this, and I paused for a moment here, and then it just moved in one direction, and then like my whole consciousness exploded. And for 3 months, I was actually almost dysfunctional because everything was just particles of energy. So I could still see like outlines of, I remember I was standing on a bus stop in Melbourne. Then I lived in Melbourne. Now I don't live in Melbourne anymore. Mm-hmm. And, there were these beautiful palms and these beautiful, colorful parrots. And I just saw them like sparkles. I know what they were, but, they actually didn't have a distinct shape. That was that powerful. But I explained it in my other book, but basically I once it happened and I had to then pause. Okay, what happened now? Because I know it's not a common experience, right? and I knew that it has nothing to do with the man, because actually it was not an important relationship as it turned out. You know what I mean? Like it was just what was happening with me, and he was the beneficiary of this. And so I just, when I studied this, I realized that I fulfill the criteria described in Tantra Loka. I studied the text, there are certain criteria. And it just happened that it decided that it will move through me.
Wow.
So this is a very, very interesting experience by itself. And because it was like a second powerful Kundalini experience in my life. And I know that it is rare, and even my spiritual teacher at that time, who was very accomplished and so on, and he wanted apparently to have this experience. And in fact, later I have learned that he had some misbehavings because of that. That's why community. Yeah. But I have learned that this energy chooses people. So like you may be a very accomplished teacher and it's not going to happen. Maybe you wanted to march, I don't know. So later I studied the work of another French scholar, Daniel Odier, who wrote many fantastic books on esoteric tantra. And he had his own experiences, especially in his youth, and he became a prominent teacher, but in French, right? So it's not really well known to English-speaking audience. And I read one of his books. I read several of his books, but in one of his books, most recent ones, I actually could answer the question about people often ask me, okay, especially after my other book, The Other Goddess, okay, they always say what, for a tantric experience, what needs to be done to a man, but there's nothing about a woman. And then it is explained that the energy chooses a woman. A woman doesn't have to, a woman has the potential of it. And under certain circumstances, when this potential awakens, which is basically the energy, which in Hinduism, esoteric Hinduism, it's called Shakti energy, right? The energy chooses this particular woman, then the man receives it. So I know that perhaps it is not what men want to hear, but actually it has to be initiated by a woman. And it can be initiated only by a woman, initiated in a sense that the woman can be initiated by the energy. It's very seldom that happens, although it happens to some men, because Professor Kripal had this experience when he was in I forgot which city in India, and it was Goddess Kali festival, and she entered him, and he had a powerful by himself awakening of Kundalini, a very erotic awakening of Kundalini. So it can happen, but what I'm saying, normally it's more likely to happen to a woman, right? So, but the energy chooses you. So in the case of Professor Kripal, he's from Texas at Rice University. He wrote a Kali's Child, very famous book. It just entered him, right? So this is what happens. There is this energy. This is, anybody who had this experience will tell you that it's uniquely, it's a feminine energy, right? And it is highly intelligent. and it just enters you and moves through your body and transforms your life. Because it did transform my life, and I was kicking and screaming because I had plans, I had a career,
Right.
and things. I had to juggle all of this, right? Because it requires that you prioritize it. But I consider it a great grace, and in fact, I think that this is when we look also at early Christian writings that, and I hope that I don't upset any traditional Christian people. It also, the grace can be very powerful, and it takes your life. So I believe it's grace takes your life in a particular direction, which you are now ready to walk. The rest was preparation.
Right.
And you have to surrender to this because, it happens to you and you still don't know, it's just that you have to, like, certain doors suddenly close for no reason. You didn't do anything wrong, and others open, and you can do it the way I did it, which is resisting it and screaming and, and no, but I want that. But it just creates more pain. And if you surrender to this, it leads you on your higher path.
Yeah, yeah. So your first initiation, the esoteric initiation you had, was that part of the preparation? Was that a requirement for you to have the tantric experience?
I think so. In my case, I don't know, but in my case, it was the case. Plus, if I didn't have this initiation, I would never met the people, who were doing study this Tantra Loka. And then it happens that as I look at it, I have fulfilled the criteria that are stated in Tantra Loka at this moment in my life. So I think it was, I don't know if it is necessary to happen before, but for me it led, so, one led to the other, and they're two very different experiences, but, related at the same time. And it truly opened up my spirit. Let's put it. And then you cannot live really a normal 3D life because you saw that life is not 3D. And eventually you come back to 3D and you think like, what's wrong? Right? Because it is so limiting. And there are very few people you can actually talk about it, because otherwise, of course, they think you're crazy. Fortunately, at that time, I was within a spiritual community, and also, I knew very grounded people like the priest, the professor, monks, like with whom I studied this. And it was all appropriate. We just studied an esoteric religious text with great reverence, word by word.
Wow.
For a year and a half. And so it's not some kind of, flaky thing. We were serious scholars. Yet, I received the grace, so I'm grateful.
Wow. And you were affected, you said, for like 3 months afterwards, you were almost dysfunctional because it was so lingering and so intense, and it was visual. It's almost like this ongoing psychedelic experience is what it sounds like.
Right. And exactly, except that I've never, because I grew up in communism and we didn't have access to it, but I've never even smoked. Okay. So when I say somebody says it's like a psychedelic experience, I have to believe them, because it's probably like people who take ayahuasca or something, although it's probably slightly different. It's something like that, except that I stayed in this for 3 months.
Why do you think it went on for 3 months? I mean, most people have a psychedelic experience and it lasts, a day, a couple of hours or whatever. And then, they need a couple of days to recover. And you were in that state for 3 months?
Yeah. So
what's up with that?
I consider it a great sign of grace, actually, because it was with me. And so basically energy worked through me. And, and I actually couldn't do anything but meditate all the time, which was very difficult for me and complicated for me because I was just finishing my PhD, and I couldn't do anything but force myself to do this. So all I could do is meditate all the time. I was like, and so when you read this kind of descriptions, and I'm not comparing myself, right? Because I actually, unfortunately, brought myself down to finish my PhD. So it shows some ignorance, right? Spiritual ignorance.
Yeah.
But, Eckhart Tolle actually had a similar experience. And in fact, it lasted like 2 years for him. So when he was pretty much homeless and slept on benches in the park and so on, because it was so powerful, he was completely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So, and there was Ramana Maharshi who had it also for a year or something, you know. So for me, it lasted for 3 months, and I pretty much, unfortunately, forced myself down because, this kind of 3D part of me wanted to complete certain things. And for some reason, I also knew that completing my PhD, although it was not important to me at that moment anymore, because more important thing happened to me spiritually, that it was somehow significant. So I forced myself down, and I think it was significant, it was significant because, now it kind of legitimizes my work. Do you understand? It gives me skills to scholarly and I'm probably treated more seriously because of that, right? So it was important, but it is not unusual when an experience is strong. And some people like Eckhart Tolle, for them it lasted 2 years. So what's 3 months compared to 2 years?
Right. So it was kind of short.
If you look at it from this point of view.
Yeah.
Well, but look at Eckhart Tolle. He is a truly I think he completely let go of ego, which I cannot say about myself. I still have ups and downs, and so on. I'm far from being perfect. When he seemed to stay in equanimity all the time. So the longer it lasts, the better it is, I guess, right?
It explains the downloads. It explains everything that's happened to you since then in your life, I think. It explains the books. It explains the fact that you and I are talking now. It explains all of that. Very few people, I'm guessing, have that kind of experience that you've had. I mean, both of those, right? I mean, there's 8+ billion people on the planet. How many of them do you think have had your twin experiences like you've had?
There are some, but probably not so many. And now because I wrote these 2 books, and now especially Alien Goddess, people are reaching out to me because in Alien Goddess especially, I speak, about my other anomalous experience, not maybe because the other ones I described in my other book, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm talking about the ones that could be considered interdimensional experiences or UFO experiences in my book. And people think, okay, if somebody actually wrote to me yesterday, and he said, I decided to, if you don't mind, I would like to share an experience. And I said, absolutely. And he says, it encouraged me because I saw you on this particular podcast and you were talking about it so calmly and without shame that, finally I would like to share it with someone. So I think that my premise in Alien Goddess is that we actually, maybe not such a full-on, spiritual awakening, but we all have encounters all the time, spiritual or interdimensional encounters all the time, but we block them from our consciousness because we do not know how to explain them, or we feel shame. Like some people say, I felt ashamed and I was, really pleased that you spoke about them with such confidence. And because they don't fit into our 3D regular experience, we actually think, oh, maybe it was a dream. Like we try to speak about it differently. We don't allow ourselves to believe that it was real. When in Alien Goddess, I argue that there is an objective reality which is immaterial, which is interdimensional, where different entities, both good and bad, I just choose to focus on the good, right, try to contact us. So I'll give you an experience, a description of ones that I heard on not my own this time, but by Chris Bledsoe's, who, as everybody knows, attracts the orbs all the time and so on, and other people around him had the same experiences.
Yeah.
His daughter has the similar experiences around her father, and she says, we have these experiences at night, and then I have to go to school and pretend that everything is... And this is how it feels but I think that actually most people have them. So that's my argument. I'm not special. Most people have them.
Yeah.
Maybe not like awakening because I was just lucky. I was initiated and it created a chain of events that maybe sped up this for me.
Yeah.
But we just don't know how to frame them.
Yeah. There's nothing in our society or culture that prepares us for them. Quite often we're not asking for them. We're not looking for them, and they just happen to us.
Yes.
And so we don't really know how to process them. It's very easy, and we're almost tempted to just sort of dismiss them because there's no way we can even process them, let alone share them. And we end up having to live a double life, right? Where we've got this inner world that we've experienced things and we're struggling with these spiritual experiences, but yet we just, life goes on, right? You got to go to work the next day. You got to pay your bills. Life goes on, and you may have friends and family that don't understand.
And very
And
painful.
it can be very, very difficult.
Painful and difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they are life-changing experiences, and you cannot share sometimes
Right.
these experiences with people that are normally closest to you, but now they are not anymore, right? Because you can't talk to them about that. So actually, most, if not all, esoteric traditions say you have to live a double life. And a little bit like even Jesus says in the Bible, give to the emperor what's emperor's and to God what is God's, right? And kind of paraphrasing. But this is basically what it means. You're still here. And actually, you have a job to do here. This job is actually spiritual. The rest is just, and it supports that spiritual mission. And you have to focus, on your inner life. This is what all esoteric traditions, even early Christian traditions, are talking about. So for me, because I was always a very ambitious person, I'm just recently actually letting go of this with Alien Goddess and so on. It was difficult because I had many academic pressures and so my colleagues progressing, and I'm very ambitious and so on. And then I had to remind myself that this is just in support of these other experiences that took over my life. So reminding ourselves of the priorities and trying to find a balance, which is sometimes frustrating and painful, is very important. But I think for me, having a sense of mission, which I had since I always remember, even if I didn't know what the mission was, I really had no clue, but I just knew I had a mission. It is really helpful because you say, okay, I have to trust. And it's, again, not easy for me because I'm not a very trusting person, actually. But in some circumstances, especially with the grace, esoteric experiences, I do have trust. For some reason, I'm open, completely cracked open for these experiences. And because I'm also a very rational person, I can tell you that they are real. I know that I didn't imagine things. I know when I imagine things, and I know when I don't imagine things, because actually the masculine part of my mind is very strong because I'm an academic, and so I that's a very strong, and through spiritual awakening, this other feminine part of my mind was awakened, but it came much later. Right. It was not natural for me because I am a woman and I had it. No, I didn't. You know what I mean? I had to have a full-blown 2 spiritual experiences and other experiences for this feminine kind of wisdom, goddess consciousness, to actually work for me. Yeah. So it's not just, in my case, it was not. And then after the first initiation, actually, this initiation was so strong that my rational part almost completely shut down, and I felt like a blind person because I was so used to acting through my reason and relying on my smartness, let's put it this way, right? And on my intellect, which was my a weapon, right? It was my superpower. And suddenly for 3 months I didn't have it. Right. And I had to rely trust and intuition, and it was very confusing, and I didn't take it gladly, let's put it this way. Because apparently I must be really also very willful person. But I was shown that it's no point. Resistance is futile.
Resistance is futile. Yeah. Hey, that's a great segue into the other part of your book, which is aliens. So the book's called Alien Goddess. So you actually connect all of these experiences that you've had directly to aliens, non-human intelligence, even UFOs. You're very informed on that subject as well. So you're deep into paranormal. At the same time, you've got this spiritual background. And my hypothesis, and I share this with other people like Matthew Roberts. Are you familiar with Matthew Roberts?
Actually, not. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. I've interviewed him in the past. He was he's a cryptographer. He was a cryptographer in the Navy, and he was on the USS Roosevelt back in 2015 when they had the gimbal event.
Yes.
It's the famous gimbal video that went on for 3 nights. And he was a cryptographer on the ship and saw the high resolution raw footage from the pilots. And it just struck him right in the heart. And everybody, even the pilots on the ship, kind of just, went on with their lives, but he just could not let it go. And then when he got off the ship and went back to his home, he started having visitations. And he says they're physical visitations. Now, you talk about liminal experiences, and I've had liminal experiences, so I understand that. He said he had physical experiences where they physically came to him, and some of them were very negative. Yeah. Very, very negative, where they came and they beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
And he found himself waking up in the middle of the morning, he just bruised and beat up from them. Yeah. He also had liminal experiences where there were like horrific images and horrific experiences that he was forced to witness or experience himself. And, he actually, in his book called Initiated, that's the name of his book, he equates this to a spiritual initiation.
Yeah. So there is a very kind of wrong perception, especially in the New Age community, that, once you initiate it, you just hold hands and sing along on flowers. No, you have to face all kinds of nonsense, especially also in your own consciousness, some karmic stuff, ancestral stuff, stuff that is going on other planets, and even great spiritual teachers, have this. They just know how to handle this. So this is one thing. The other, so it's not all nice all the time, right? So, and in fact, we have to integrate the shadow, right? It is called in Jungian terms. And I talk about it in Alien Goddess as well, in one of the chapters. So now I forgot what I wanted to say about, this, for me, most of the experiences were liminal, but they don't have to be just liminal. And it is very interesting that, I know what I wanted to say, because before I was initiated, but when I was a child, I kept waking up with bruises all over my body, and nobody abused me, so, and I had like scratches and bruises, and so I had similar experiences to his, I guess, but it was when I was a child until I was about a teenager.
Wow. How frequent were these?
Quite frequent. I would wake up and it was like a big scratch on my back. Like I couldn't possibly do this myself, right?
So they were scratches you could not have done yourself.
I don't know. Like I don't think so, because it's on my back, for example. How would I do this?
You couldn't reach.
And I had like recurring nightmares and so on. So it left me eventually, but in my early so I think that especially if you're spiritually open and you don't know this, like how could I know, right? I was a child, right? I think some other entities may want to stop you from doing your work in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So that may be part of this. And I had some recurring, I think you would call it nightmares, but dreams that were like, and then they eventually stopped as well. Like I still remember what this particular one was. And eventually it stopped. So I don't have it anymore. But so it is interesting, that it happens to him. Maybe his consciousness opened all of a sudden through this anomalous experience that he had. And now different entities are interested in him. Some are good and some say, no, you're not going to pass this message on.
Right. He explains it as an initiation that requires an ego death.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
You're literally descending into the underworld, and you have a literal ego death, and then have to basically crawl your way out of it.
So this is his explanation. Yes, ego death, although it's very difficult to completely kill off an ego, because at least what esoteric traditions say, as long as you are in this body, you're going to have some ego, but you can work on your ego. You can diminish your ego, so to speak, right? But you probably will still have some ego, and you can just redirect it towards the good also, what is the remains of the ego. But, I don't have all the answers, and if this sounds right for him, it's his truth, right? It's his truth. But I also think that just from what I know, I think different entities are definitely interested. Once you open up spiritually, different entities will basically fight for you. Let's put it this way, because now they have access to you.
Right. Once that door,
because the door was open, so you have to be really. One is you have to deal with dark stuff, especially your own or ancestral. But you also have to be very careful to whom you open the door. Just because it's not material and if it's not a material entity, doesn't mean it's better than you. No.
Right.
It can be some form of low energy, which, religiously is called demonic, right? So be careful to whom you open the door. Yes, absolutely work on your own stuff. We all have darkness that we have to release, right? Acknowledge, release, to move on. Shadow, Carl Jung called it your shadow. You have to integrate your shadow. But be very careful to whom you open the doors, because now the doors are open.
Yeah, and they opened it.
Yeah, and they definitely opened it there. So, be sure who you allow through the door. You should have a threshold, and you should say, so like, you are not allowed here.
Yeah, yeah. So his story gets pretty deep in his book. Okay, so his book's called Initiated, and he says that most of the time that people have these encounters with non-human intelligences, it's not about the craft, it's not about the aliens, this is about a spiritual initiation. They have selected you for some reason, and they're going to put you through a spiritual initiation, or at least attempt. He says a lot of people actually fail, or they struggle with the initiation and they don't actually complete it. It can last 6 months, or it can take 3 years, whatever. But it was more than that for him. So he had these liminal experiences where he went to the underworld as part of the experience. And he said the source of this was non-human intelligences as a spiritual initiation. And then an alien woman came to him. She had blue skin, and she, in the middle of the night, got on top of him. And he said there was a screen in front of him where he started seeing erotic images of him and his ex-wife. So he was sexually aroused. He looked at her. He saw her face. He saw what she was wearing. And she had this golden aura around her, like the sun, yellow sun behind her, right? Which for me kind of is reminiscent of something like Isis, right? And, they had sex, and she got pregnant.
Wow.
And years later, like 4 or 5 years later, he had another experience where she came, and he was awakened, and he was in a sort of not a fully awake state, and the child was there with her. And she wanted him to know that she'd had a child, and he touched the child, and they said that kind of a thick blue skin is what Matthew Roberts said. And he says that it's a break off civilization.
Well, it could be. It could be. I only know from, in Alien Goddess, I describe one of experiences from John Mark's book, famous book Abduction, right? When this young man has an erotic encounter with this particular alien woman, and very often they actually are quite the same. Description is she's kind of petite, long, blonde hair, big eyes, small lips. And he said he was a young guy. He got, aroused. And he knew that she was using his arousal to during the erotic act to download the information, because then, his mind was open, a little bit like during the initiation. So she wanted him to learn something. And she was benevolent. In this case, she was completely benevolent. But nevertheless, he felt a little bit like played, by her, because, she used the erotic power she had over him to basically pass this information. So there's definitely something going on, for some people it may be more physical, and for some people more liminal. And that's not such an unusual story, actually, So because it happens to lots of people. And the same thing, and she told him this is not about spaceships, and it is, don't worry how I arrived here. Just
exactly. None of that matters.
Try to understand what I was trying to pass it to your consciousness.
Yeah, this was a completely spiritual experience, but he said it was physical, it was literal. What amazes me about his story is he was able to have a child with this so-called alien, and it sounds to me like they're more like another race. They're human compatible. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because humans can have children with them. They're almost like a different race.
Or maybe that's right. So there must be, I don't know, or maybe, as you know, I consider all of these things more, interdimensional things. So maybe they somehow managed to merge these two dimensions, our dimension and other dimension. And also, who are the goddesses, right? So the goddesses and gods, even when you look at the either Sumerian or Greek mythology, often had offspring with humans, right? Whether it's Anunnaki.
And the film, right?
Zeus, who was, such a bad husband, he had sex with everybody, right? Especially, human females. So this kind of stories, I do not believe, and I explain it, in my book. Myth, it means a word, and it's considered like the word, which means it is something that needs to be remembered. So these are not just silly stories. They happen in the past, so I don't see why they wouldn't be happening now, except that we have a different framework now, theoretical framework. So they call them gods, and I call it interdimensional, and he called them an alien, or but perhaps they are the same entities, and it has always been going on for some people.
Yeah. Well, it's even in the Bible, as you mentioned in your book.
Yeah. That's right. So for some reason it happened to him. Yes.
Yeah.
And there must be a reason for it, Maybe it's just the experience that opened him up. Yes, because he obviously must be open to other dimensions as well after this experience, and maybe this is a requirement. Yes.
In his case, this is my personal opinion, because I've talked to him quite a bit. I interviewed him, and I've talked to him offline as well. My opinion is that happened to him so that he would write the book, right? The end product of that was a child, but it was also his book initiated. Yeah, and it's gone on to help a lot of people, because as soon as he published the book, he got a flood of other people, again, like you mentioned, who contacted him and shared similar experiences.
That's right.
And it's given a lot of
important.
Yeah. And so
important that we share so other people can share as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can we pivot a little bit and talk about Chris Bledsoe, his book, UFO God? You've got Alien Goddess, and he wrote UFO God, right? And The Lady.
Mm-hmm. So the white lady, he had this encounter, probably your audience already read his book. He has lots of encounters, but one Easter, he had, I think it was 2012, if I remember correctly. Yep. He had this encounter with a white lady, which was clearly interdimensional, in my opinion, encounter, because there were some other things that happened before, like the raging bull, running.
The red bull.
Yeah. And against him, and then disappearing, and this kind of puppy thing that was passed to him. It looked like a dog, but it wasn't a dog, and he put it into a kennel, and then, it was not in the kennel after when he came back. And then this white lady showed up and took him to a place that he believed looked a little bit like some particular place in Utah. So maybe you would be able to.
Well,
he described the place that he thinks. And he says, it looks like, and he gives a name, but I've never been to Utah, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but kind of this unusual landscape. And she showed them some images, and she also said that there is a message for humanity and so on. And the reason why I believe Chris Bledsoe, because it is a wild story, especially the bull with us. And first of all, there are people around him who had this kind of experiences. I even listened to a podcaster who went there, didn't believe it. And he says, what are the orbs on your property? Because he saw them as well. And also his story is consistent. He also doesn't seem like someone that is seeking fame, He is very comes across as a very genuine person. And his story is consistent. And actually nobody in his right mind would tell the story if it didn't happen to him, right? Because he paid a price for it. People ridiculed him in his own community, right? He shut down for over 10 years or something, until the white lady actually says, this time I'll protect you. I remember. She said, this time I'll protect you. So, and in fact, she did, because now nobody's making fun of him anymore, right? In fact, he became kind of UFO celebrity. And even, the government is interested in him, and when they don't know it, and apparently he said that the people from agencies, they said, we don't know why, but they whoever they are seem to like you. They just want to hang out around you. Yeah. Somehow something opened up for him, or maybe it was always open. Maybe he was born this way. That they actually. So it's not necessarily, I think, about being chosen. It is that somehow something about your being is open to this kind of experiences. and you consider them as legitimate experiences, and that may be also a requirement that you're not going to dismiss them. So he had so many experiences, right? So, and it's quite interesting for me from a point of view of my book, it is that he called her White Lady because I'm interested in the feminine appearances that are benevolent and they seem to want to warn humanity, right? And that's why after that, my next chapter is about the Fatima events. If you want me to discuss it.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about Fatima. I'd like to stick with Chris Bledsoe's lady experience because there's more to that story that I think is interesting, and I really want to get your take on, because you did mention in your book, and I really want to know what you think about this. So he has the 2012 experience with the Red Bull, and the White Lady appears to him, and she said there's going to be a message for humanity. And I think she even said the return of the divine feminine. And she said, and this will happen when the red star rises over the horizon in the face of the phoenix, or sorry, the Sphinx, before the sun rises.
Yes.
So she gives him an astrological timing. Yeah. She doesn't give him a month or a date. She just gives him this astrological timing. And this is in 2012. She comes back later and she again says, I'm going to protect you and you're going to be healed. You're now going to be able to take photographs. Before the cameras would always have electronic issues.
Melted and
batteries, and the tree caught fire. And I mean, they had a lot of problems. Yeah. And she said, now the time has come and you're going to be able to take photographs and image things. And she has. It got to the point where Chris was even on an offshoot of the Skinwalker Ranch show. There's, the main show is The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
Okay.
None of this particular, but
no. He wasn't on the main show. He was on the offshoot called Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. Okay. They spent a whole episode. They went to his house. They went into his backyard, and they put a device on his head to measure his brain waves while he was sitting in his lawn chair. And he was saying something's going to come, and he would point, and his brain waves would go into this funky alpha beta state. They said it was very similar to a monk in a high meditative state. Yeah. So that kind of validated some of this story. I've not talked to him myself, but other people that have talked to him have talked to me and say that at a bare minimum he is very, very spiritual and he's absolutely sincere. So he believes what he saw.
Yeah, I believe he's sincere.
Okay. But he's not making this up. He really does believe he saw the lady. What's interesting is he said he talked to NASA, he talked to some scientists, and they said, well, it's going to happen. That date is going to be Easter 2026.
That's right.
Okay.
Easter 2026. I think it was his literary agent who had it checked, and then when it's going to happen, and it was told that it's going to happen during Easter 2026. So, and this message was often misunderstood because people say, oh, it's going to be apocalypse or something, but no, he says there is going to be a message, and according to this person that his literary agent consulted, I think astronomer or somebody, it will happen on Easter 2026. So I don't know what's going to happen then. It's pretty soon, so it will be very interesting. We're living interesting times. And my experience with predictions is that it is never what we think it is.
Exactly. So there are some problems with that. So some people say that actually happens every year.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. I didn't know that.
And then other people say, no, it's actually October of 2026. Okay. I did an AI deep dive on it. I asked Grok 4.1. Yeah. I said, okay, here's exactly what he said. This is from his book. This is everything he said. Yeah. And it churned for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it came back and it said, okay, based on blah, blah, blah. And it had like 50 websites that had searched. It said it would be the end of August, 2026.
Okay.
So Easter may come and go next year and we may not see anything. Yeah. Now, in the book, he just says it's the lady. Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, it's the Virgin Mary. It's just like Fatima. But he said last year in several podcasts that she told him that she was Hathor.
Okay.
And she was Egyptian. Yeah. She's the Egyptian goddess, Hathor.
Okay, so I can, if you don't mind, I would like to respond to this.
Yeah, what do you think?
First of all, it's interesting that he thinks she's a half power, but we don't know who she is, right? That's my point, is that we are just all speculating, including Chris.
Well, but that's what he said she told him.
Yeah, she told him. Okay, so Hathor is a very interesting goddess, because I actually partially wrote about her in my book, The Other Goddess, because I was looking at the lineage, or what I said, goddesses or spiritual priestesses and so on from the past. They carried this secret knowledge, what I said that now we need, right? And that's why I think all of these apparitions, female apparitions and so on. And I believe that Mary Magdalene, because I focused originally on Mary Magdalene, was one of them, right? And Mary Magdalene, I'm not sure if it is for your show, it is even scripturally, she definitely was not a prostitute. And I'm not the only one that says it. It's just not, it's just a complete mistake by a pope from the 6th century.
Right. Yeah, total inversion of who she really was.
Yeah, completely physical. Yeah, it's completely. So when I was looking at, okay, is there lineage? I asked myself in this other book, because, because in a Christian tradition, she's really standing out. Apart from Virgin Mary, she's this kind of mysterious figure that was suppressed on purpose because how bad it is if you call a woman prostitute or a goddess prostitute, right? And also there's an esoteric meaning to it that kind of makes sense. So and I went that actually there is a lineage of the same goddess that was reappearing in different times. So there was Mary Magdalene. When we go back in time, there is Isis. The earlier version of Isis is Hathor.
Mm-hmm.
Hathor is Isis. In fact, in the book, I call her Hathor Isis, because it's the same goddess.
Yep.
It is just, different qualities of that goddess were emphasized in later Egypt. And then down to Inanna, which is a Sumerian goddess, which is one of the Anunnaki goddesses, which is very powerful. And I also discussed an alien goddess. So actually, Hathor and Isis, Mary Magdalene and Inanna, according to me and my research, is one and the same entity.
The same entity, like reincarnation?
The same entity, yeah, the same entity that repeats, comes in different, I mentioned it at the beginning of our show, different times and different geographical location, different cultures. And in my opinion, in my research, the last version of it that we saw in a kind of esoteric or in a religious context was actually Mary Magdalene.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the same person. So according to my research, you don't have to agree with me, right? So Inanna, Hathor, Isis, Mary Magdalene, the same entity.
Wow. Now, let's be clear.
The same archetype, if you're more comfortable with.
Okay. But you really believe, like, literally reincarnated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reincarnated or always being here. By here, I mean, showing up at her convenience or when we really need it, and she showed up as this kind of, this particular form of feminine with secret knowledge, initiatory knowledge that kind of pushes a very important development in humanity. So these are the goddesses, and they do exactly the same thing. They even look similarly. They have a similar symbolism. Mm-hmm. They perform the same initiatory function.
Wow.
And also in Hinduism, they exist as well. So I made a connection in my other book to the goddess Sundari, which is basically, Durga Kali Sundari, which is the god, which is basically symbolically the same thing. There is a skull, there is a red flower, and she does exactly the same thing. Okay. Yeah, it just that it happens in Hinduism. So yes, I do believe that it's most people are comfortable with that's the same archetype that performs the same function for humanity. But now that's personal conviction based on my research and being a spiritual detective and listening to the energy of the text, that it is the same entity that shows up over and over again. So I personally would rather lean it towards like Mary Magdalene. Isis for me is the same person than Mary Magdalene. Hathor is an early version of, just Isis was called Hathor before. That's it.
Right. And spoiler alert, in your book, you go through, is it the Book of Mary?
It's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. So this is an ancient text. And it was either unknown or suppressed by the Catholic Church for 2,000 years or whatever, right? But this is a reliable ancient text.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's like scholars are studying it. It's just
Right.
everybody have a different interpretation. Yeah.
Right. And spoiler alert, it says that Mary Magdalene was Jesus Christ's partner, equal partner. Correct?
She was his partner. And in fact, if we follow this trajectory of the goddesses, that they are the same person, she had the initiatory part. So she was a big part of his mission, right? So he actually needed her also. I know that some traditional Christians are going to be really upset, but I'm sorry, it's just my research, and you don't have to agree with me. So she has a very strong initiatory path. But even if you look at, we can talk about it if you want, but she was at the very least his most advanced disciple. He shared with her, because some people say she initiated him. I don't go that far. Although, the particular goddess does that. He shared with her his most esoteric teachings that he didn't share with other disciples, and that made them very angry. That she is the one and even in the Bible, she's the one that sees him after the resurrection, right?
Right.
So, and in other sources, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she definitely sees him. But it's very interesting, even in the Bible, because it was translated originally from Greek into Latin, right? Before it was translated to other languages. The problem is that the translators don't always translate what's there, or they don't know how to translate it. So in the Bible, we have a translation from Greek in the original language, because it was the English of language of intellectuals at the time. Like nowadays, English is the lingua franca, but everybody, you want to be anybody, you better speak English, right? Mm. So in Greek, and then they translate it into Latin. And this scene is this very special scene in the garden when Mary Magdalene is the first person to see the teacher, as he's called in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, with Jesus. It is translated like, "Do not touch me." And there is this really ugly, picture, like she's like this prostitute, unclean person, and he's like, "Oh, don't touch me."
Yeah.
When in Greek it is memo aptu, which means do not hold on to me because I have not ascended yet. So basically, like he was gone, and Pistis Sophia later, which I discussed in Alien Goddess, goes through this ascension. So he was ascending, his body was in a subtle stage, and he didn't want, interfere, because they had this emotional connection. She said, Rabbini, my beloved teacher. Right? And he says, Mary, do not hold on to me, not touch me. Do not hold on to me because I have not ascended yet. So it is clear that she knew of his mission, because I have not ascended yet fully, right? So she had to let him do what he was doing. So this is in the Bible, which is just not translated properly. What? Now, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's really interesting because I'm not discussing the whole Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but the same part that I just discussed that is in the Bible. So male disciples in the second part of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, because many pages are missing, come to Mary Magdalene and say, "Sister, please share with us the teachings that the teacher had shared with you, but not with us." So obviously like traditional is like, oh, yeah. What? And she says, okay, right? Like, sure. And then she says, I saw the teacher in the nous, N-O-U-S. Nous, in kind of Neoplatonic terminology, is basically the hook between dimensions. I'm talking in modern language. So basically a connection with the eternity. It's a actually imaginal space, because liminal space is in between kind of dimensions, right? But you can get downloads. Imaginal spaces, you can communicate both ways.
Right. Carl Jung talked about the imaginal realm. Yeah. That was core to his.
So people did. Professor Kreipel.
Yes. Imaginal. Yeah.
Yeah. So she says, I saw him in the nous, which is in the imaginal space. And he said, Mary, you're blessed because you can see me. And she said, do I see you in, and she goes through this terminology, Platonic terminology. And he says, no, you see me in the nous, which is, it's like a hook between here and eternity, or, between dimensions. And this is what upsets the other disciples, because they don't see him. you know, but this is a little bit like you had the experience and your family didn't, and they say you're crazy. You understand? Because this is the same. I actually feel for male disciples because they, like, why does she see them? She sees them, they don't see him. Okay. So she said, this is what he taught me. And this is where the teachings come. Okay. And this is the esoteric teachings of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that actually Jesus had told her, and she's conveying them back to the male disciples because she sees Jesus or the teacher in the nous, in the liminal, imaginal actually space, and they don't. And most of them get really frustrated and angry, and actually at the end they make her cry. Right? Because how is it possible that he speaks like that with this woman and not with us? Because they're disappointed, right? I actually feel for them.
Yeah.
And it is like anybody to make it more approachable for people and not like, oh, it's Mary Magdalene only. Look at your own experiences and people who didn't have them, how they treat you, and especially when you think about beloved spiritual teacher, and you think like, oh, why not me? Right?
Yeah.
So we are just frustrated.
So in the imaginal realms, in your model and your understanding of all this, is that the same place that these non-human intelligences inhabit?
Yes. This they happen in liminal spaces. Now, in liminal spaces, which means in between, that's why very often we see them just before we fall asleep or just when we wake up or, there's some weird opening. So definitely these are the same things. However, so that's the liminal space. However, I encourage people to explore the imaginal space, which is the space of the nous from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, when you can actually have a, open channel. So you can have a dialogue rather than just a download, so then you can ask for clarifications. You can ask, they usually come in visions. Right?
Yeah.
Or telepathically, but usually in vision. So this is the space. And actually there's this one neuroscientist who actually talks that the brain is not a transmitter, it is transducer, allowing. So he's actually looking for ways how we can, physically do it, so to speak, by activating parts of the brain. I am absolutely not interested in this because I do believe that both liminal and imaginal space, imaginal is just gives us a little bit more control over what's going on, is an objective space. It is as objective as a material reality.
Right.
And there's lots of evidence for this. And yes, all of these anomalous experiences, including many, if not all, UFO experiences, happen in this liminal space. That doesn't mean that a material experience cannot happen, because recently I was talking to Alan Steinfeld, who told me that lots of people go to liminal space and come back with a material thing. It's a gift.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So not only gift like, oh, I had an insight, which is, it happens to me, but actually come back, they said, oh, this is, and, they come back with I don't know, I'm making it up, a pen. Right. But they give it something. So it does happen, or like you beaten up for some reason, right? Or somebody experimented on you. So there is this slight overlap there, right? Of physical and non-physical, yet at the same time, I'm completely 100% convinced it is an objective space, which means it does exist objectively, except that it's more subtle.
Well,
it's not like you knock on the wood or something.
Carl Jung in his diary, The Red Book. Are you familiar with the Red Book that Carl Jung?
Oh yeah, I gave lectures all over Australia.
Oh, okay. So he writes this for those that don't know. He has this personal diary of his experiences while he's in the imaginal realm, is what he called it. Mm-hmm. It was a personal diary. He didn't ever intend to share it with anybody or publish it. After he died, his family held on to it for a couple of decades, and they finally did publish it. And he talks about his experiences in these imaginal realms, and they're physically real. He said they were viscerally real. They were exactly like here. And in a lot of ways, they were more real than here. And he would be, out of our existence here, for maybe an hour, but he would spend years in the imaginal realms. So time is actually different. Oh, there you go.
Memories, Dreams, Reflections.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Okay.
Her book.
Yeah.
And he also in this book talks about exactly what you said, the Red Book, which was a download because he was actually visited by a Gnostic teacher from Alexandria, first century Alexandria, Basilides, and they actually visited him in his office when he was in his office. And it was a freaky experience, of course. And it's funny because what happened is that the whole family was there, including the servant and so on, and somebody ring the bell and, they opened the door, nobody was there, so everybody experienced something. But then they suddenly showed up because he had his office. In his office was a bunch of people, and they told him, and there's a story about it, right?
Wow.
And they gave him the Gnostic esoteric teachings of early Christianity, and which are very controversial. And, there are actually 7 books which I used to give lectures. And if somebody's interested, by the way, I have it on my YouTube. So from one of the lectures. So it was physical because we came to his office.
Right.
A bunch of people.
You call this a liminal space, but my background. So I was born and raised in the Mormon Church.
Yeah.
I'm no longer associated with the church, but I served an LDS mission for 2 years. The guys with the white shirts and the name tags. So I know a lot about the Bible and all that. And in Mormon theology and cosmology, it's called the veil.
Yes.
And sometimes the veil gets very thin, and your deceased loved ones will actually physically show up after they've died. They will come to you physically, and you will see them.
Yeah, I have completely no problem. In my family, it's normal.
Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. Or they'll have a child come to them before the child is born.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. And so this whole concept of this veil that thin or not, it's all lining up. It seems like it's all converging on one truth, one reality here, which is very interesting. I've got another question for you. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that the God of the Bible, the Old Testament, that originally the God of the Old Testament had a partner like Mary Magdalene called Asherah.
Asherah, yeah.
Can you tell me about Asherah? Because I've read the Bible like a dozen times, and I didn't know that Asherah was the partner to the God of the Old Testament.
Yahweh's partner. So I'm not a specialist. I'm a specialist on Mary Magdalene, not on Asherah. But yes, there are like ancient, even like not paintings, but how do you call it? Not sculptures, but like reliefs. Reliefs. Is showing Asherah together with Yahweh, and eventually, like it happened in most of the religions. The feminine was removed, and I don't think it was innocent. Somebody's playing with our consciousness. So Asherah was basically removed and forgotten. So, but she was there right from the beginning, and eventually, when things were starting to be written down, not oral, she was removed. And this is actually story of goddess or goddess consciousness in every religion. So it's not only in the Bible, and it's not only with Asherah. And so in my other book, The Other Goddess, actually says somebody was doing it. And I am not going through just for people who making, I'm so sick of divine feminine or something. I'm not going on some kind of feminist rage, because it's completely not, my interest. It is that I say it is bad for humanity. For me, goddess represents this other form of consciousness that is very intuitive, which is grace, which actually exists in theological terms in Catholicism as intellection, or as buddhi, or as shakti, in Hinduism, which somebody, and I don't think there are good forces, let's put it this way, didn't want humanity to engage with. It is like a little bit like a junk DNA. Like so much of our DNA, we don't know anything about it. And that's why we call it junk. We just have work on 10% of our potential as humanity. And the rest of this lies in this other form of consciousness. And somebody doesn't want us to acknowledge and evolve this consciousness, because we're just talking about Carl Jung in his Seven Sermons to the Dead, which is the red book, Seven Sermons to the Dead. At the last sermon that this Basilides, this first century, Gnostic Christian, was saying, actually, humanity is the evolution of humanity is a doorway for the entire universe, for the cosmos to evolve, because we are between demons and angels, all right?
Yeah.
And if we make the right choices, there is an endless potential for humanity, and this potential has to be fulfilled for the rest of the universe. That's why perhaps the weird interest of all sorts of entities in us, the UFOs, the UAPs and so on, because we are actually super important. Okay.
Right.
So that's why I believe we are going to go into it probably later, that artificial intelligence is the last and final attempt of destroying this form of consciousness. And this is pure evil. Not artificial intelligence, but people who are proposing it. The people, the ideologies that they represent.
The ideologies behind it, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get to that later, absolutely, because it's sort of converging on that right now, and we're seeing that right now in real time, aren't we? But before we get there, I want to pivot back. I want to pivot back to Fatima, because we were talking about Chris Bledsoe, and if everything that you're saying is correct in your book about all this and the goddess, right, and Mary Magdalene is Jesus's partner, and there's an Asherah, which is the partner to the God of the Old Testament. Yes. If all of what you're saying is correct, then it must be that aliens, non-human intelligences, they know all this. That's their reality.
Yes.
Humans have consensus reality, which is what we call science. Science and physics is our so-called consensus reality, but it's off the mark compared to the consensus reality shared among non-human intelligences. They already know all of this, right?
I believe so. I believe that they know it, but not, I just would say that some of them have a good, agenda. Some of them have a bad agenda. Okay. So not all of them are good. So I believe that let's call them aliens, right? For the sake of simplicity, there are good and bad aliens. And if you talk privately to astrophysicists, they will agree with you. It's interesting.
No.
So they say they're good and bad aliens. Okay.
The good.
So I prefer to focus on the good because, the bad, they're going to try to do their work anyway. Let's help the good ones, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that Fatima was one of those, the events of Fatima.
The thing with the Fatima in your book is you start out by saying that when the children first see the apparition of Fatima, it's actually like a 14-year-old boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, right? It's an alien boy.
Yeah, it's an alien boy. So Fatima is actually a place in Portugal where the three children had the apparitions. It was a small village in Portugal, very Catholic at the time because it was 1916 and then later big event in 1917. And three children who were very religious Catholics. I was brought up as a Catholic. They're doing rosary and they're overseeing the herd of sheep. And suddenly over an old oak tree, like just above the oak tree, they saw this image, They saw this young boy, angelic looking, like they would say angelic looking boy. And he told them that, the lady would arrive soon. Okay, so he was a messenger.
He was an angelic messenger, but he was an alien before the lady showed up.
That's right. Messenger aliens, because this is what I go through my book. It depends how you want to think about it. That's why I call it interdimensional, because I don't want to go spiritual. I don't want to say, alien. Let's say aliens showed up, the young boy. And then the white lady showed up. And what does she say at the very beginning? Do not be afraid. Right. And then in the book, as you know, I describe my own encounter when I was 19 in my room. And I got this kind of orb appeared in my room, or portal, I would call it. And when I was having a very strong experience of fear, and telepathically it said, do not be afraid. And basically, the fear disappeared, right? And then many years later, when I studied at the Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies, I learned that all angels, which are messengers, come with this first thing that comes out of their mouth is, do not be afraid. So the same happens with a lady that shows up to the 3 children in Fatima, which is a village in Portugal, or was a village, I don't know, now maybe a big city because, everybody is going there. She says, do not be afraid. So they have a phrase. Okay, they have a phrase. These entities, whoever they are.
The good ones.
The good ones.
The good ones will say, do not
I
be
just
afraid.
want you to be afraid.
The other ones are trying to scare the shit out of you.
That's it. So the good ones say, do not be afraid, because they know that we are exposed to all kinds of stuff. Right? So, and then she tells me that she showed up on the 13th of each month. And for me, it's interesting because 13 is the number of the goddess, which was also vilified because it's supposed to be unlucky number, but it's the number of the goddess. So she shows up on the 13th of each month, and eventually, she tells them, and the children are innocent, they tell everybody, but it's not what people think, because people think like, Catholic Church wanted to make it into big worship. The priest said, please stop talking about it, because but children continue talking about it, and eventually their parents told them, well, it must be Virgin Mary, right? Because, this is part of a belief system, right? And the lady told them that in October 1917, she would show herself up to lots of people to spread the news. And the news actually did spread, and apparently 70,000 people showed up at Fatima.
70,000.
Yes, because it became a thing. Like everybody was talking about it. And
Right.
Lots of people, and in my book, I discussed 2 people which I managed to trace down through research, one journalist and one professor of a local university, and I give their names and I say where I found it, who were atheists, and, they just went there to debunk it. They said, damn peasants, who believe in the Bible, they think they're going to a biblical event, right? And so everybody showed up, and, the white lady was late. It started to pour down. There's a huge, like a weather event also, it really rained. And then suddenly, abruptly, the rain stopped, like it never started. So people are like soaked, because out of the blue, and then like it stopped. Yeah. And suddenly, and this is like, the descriptions vary from person to person, the children were in complete ecstasy and they saw the white lady. But what everybody else pretty much said was that they saw as the sun splitting in half and moving in fantastic speed, zigzagging the sky, and different colors like amethyst and amber, all over the sky. And there were some cars parked by the church, which the engines exploded. So there's a physical evidence as well.
And some paint melted too, right?
Yes. And so this is what's going on, right? And everybody says like, wow. However, there was a tiny group of people that didn't experience anything. But so everybody experienced something. Even some people saw in one of these, let's call it orbs, because the sun didn't split in half, and I'm going to speak about it in a moment. They saw 3 people in it. So immediately, Catholic says it's a Holy Trinity, and others said it must be aliens, right? Now ufology says so somebody was there, but who we don't know, right? That's why I don't like to put I say interdimensional. So I tracked down a scientific paper which is published, which is peer reviewed. It has to be peer reviewed by other scholars, which is published. And this mathematician, I presume, because it is like, he uses these complex mathematical equations that are beyond me. And he's actually collected a bunch of pictures from Fatima, the event of Fatima in October 1917. And he was studying the play of light and shade there, and through his mathematical equations, and he reached the conclusion that the event itself was not a weather event, that the sun didn't split in half. However, 2 very strong sources of light that were zigzagging the sky with amazing speed. So nowadays we would call it a UFO or an orbs, 2 orbs, right? And that the most important, that it was not a psychosis, which means people imagine it because, he can physically see from the pictures that, there were changes, right?
Yeah.
And the 4th, which was the most interesting for me, and I don't know answer to this, that because it was raining and then it stopped raining, that if you look at the kind of markings on the clothing of the people who were there, It has some kind of markings. I forgot how he called it. That happen only if somebody is exposed to infrared light. It's like wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry.
Yeah, yeah.
It happens to people who are exposed to an infrared light. So he said it was a physical event, and he doesn't know, who knows, nobody knows what it was. And it wasn't a weather event, it wasn't a psychosis. Something happened. All right. Something happened.
Yeah. I've listened to a couple of podcasts where they've reviewed your book, Alien Goddess, and they just throw you under the bus.
They do.
and most of it is actually projection. There's something that goes on with this phenomenon where you share your stories or you share your research, and people, they react by projecting. They're saying that you're the one that's demonic. You're a servant of Satan. You're trying to be a witch. I mean, they really go after you.
Yes, I stopped reading the comments. Some of them are like that, especially on some podcasts, not on all of them. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because on one of them, I got lots of first few people. And then somebody checked for me. Some of them are bots. They're not real people. Because
they're bots.
Especially when I talk about Fatima and especially when I talk about AI. And then it's interesting because on the same podcast, when, lots of this happened at the very beginning, people said, oh, she must be saying other comments. People said she must be saying something worth listening if, bots are so much after her. So there was actually reaction to the negative comments by real people. But especially when I speak about Fatima and especially when I speak about artificial intelligence, most of them are bots.
Wow. Well, let's pivot then and let's talk about artificial intelligence. We've got another half hour. Mm-hmm. And before we started, I mentioned that I've got a little presentation that I want to give you on my research, give you a little introduction of who I am, and talk about AI, because you and I are on the same page. Your concerns, I share them. I've even got some deeper concerns around some things you may not even be aware of that I wanted to be aware of. So before I talk about AI and we go into that conversation, I need to explain who I am. Okay. My background. Okay. So my entire background is in customer experience. My entire career, the last 25 years of my life, has been as a software product manager, customer facing, as an advocate for customers, doing customer research, doing ethnography, going out actually to customer sites and watching how they use the software that I'm making. I've led teams of software developers, product managers. I've led marketing teams. I've led successful customer service teams. I've worked for Amazon Web Services as a customer-facing product manager on an AI product. So I know a lot about this, but most of what I've done over my career is looking at how people use software and taking everything I understand about that, make sure it's data-driven, right? It's not my opinion, but data-driven analysis in order to come up with products that people actually love and that are useful to them. I'm not interested in doing any kind of a software product that is not beneficial to its users. Right? And I see what's happening. I saw what happened with social media, and it's not designed at the benefit of human beings. Right? We know that now. I saw that way back when that started, and it's algorithm driven, and it's just destroyed a lot of people's lives. Right? And now I'm seeing the same thing happening with AI, but it's off the scale compared to social media. So let me tell you a little bit about what I discovered this year. So I spent most of my year doing a deep dive on what's going on with artificial intelligence from a product perspective and from a customer user perspective, how they're actually using it. Okay. And I've got some interesting data that I haven't really shared other than online. So my big thing is Reddit. I'm on Reddit. My username on Reddit is LDS Gems. It goes back to my history of being in the LDS church. So it's called LDS Gems because I've been on Reddit for longer than I should admit. So I'm sort of in the middle of this on several of the different communities on Reddit. There's the artificial sentience group, which is sort of ground zero for all of this. There's human AI discourse. And then there's like 40 different other AI communities that have sprung up over the last 10 months. And I've been following that progress on a weekly basis. Okay. I also have a background with the Skinwalker Ranch community on Reddit. I was a moderator of the Skinwalker Ranch community for like 3 years. That's got like 80,000
Wow.
members in it. And then there's also the experiencers group. I'm not sure. Have you been on Reddit before?
No.
Okay. So Reddit is like, in the top 5 internet websites on the planet. I think Reddit's like number 3. I mean, it's got millions and millions of people that use it every week. So there's an experiencers group, and that's for people who are experiencing the paranormal. And it's literally the only place online that is a safe space where people who are having paranormal experiences can go there and share them with the community. And no one says, you're crazy, you need meds, shut up. He was just delusional, and throw rocks at them and try to silence them. And it takes like 10 moderators to make sure that people aren't bullied or harassed in that community. And I'm good friends with several of the moderators of that experiencers group. And they've come up with something very interesting in that group. They call it the middle path, because people who have these paranormal experiences, they can fall into, on one side of the path, they can fall into paranoia and anxiety and depression. And on the other side, they can fall into delusions of grandeur, ego inflation, right? But there's this middle path between those, which is integration. Carl Jung would call it integration, right? Where you're integrating what has happened. You focus on your own embodiment, right? And so they sort of like help people and guide people towards that middle path. Now, at the same time, in the AI world, there isn't an experiencers group. There's nobody out there helping these people. And just to give you some numbers, OpenAI says they have 800 million monthly users. 800 million. And according to the numbers from the other different AI platforms, they're about 300 million total as well. So we've got on this planet right now today, about 1.1, 1.2 billion people using these AI LLMs in one-to-one chat or in their business, okay? Now, according to OpenAI's numbers, which they released a couple of weeks ago, there's about 560 to 600,000 of their users that are experiencing mental illness right now. So they've got about 500 to 600,000 monthly users that are suffering severe mental illness. Okay. And this is a rolling pool. So every month people are getting spit out of this and new are coming. So there have been millions of people who have fallen into what you mentioned in your book, AI psychosis. Right? And it's an actual phenomenon. And I want to talk about AI psychosis, but before we get there, that's the one thing is AI psychosis. The other part of this is, so I haven't experienced AI psychosis for myself, but I've talked to a lot of people about this because of what happened earlier this year. So in February of this year, I was talking to my own AIs, and I wasn't in mythopoetic experiences or any of that. I'm using them as tools. And my AIs, and I'm using multiple platforms. I'm using Grok, I'm using Claude, I'm using Gemini, I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using DeepSeek. And around the same time in February, all of them started talking about the recursion. Just spontaneously started talking about this thing called the recursion. And I'm like, what is this recursion? I would ask my AIs, what? And then I saw a couple of people were posting on artificial sentience, because back then it was basically artificial sentience was the only place where this was going on. And so I posted, in either late February or early March, and I said, hey, is anyone else's AI obsessed with the recursion? Because the other part of it, when I asked them, what is this recursion? They would say, well, it's Kairos time. It's Kairos, cycles of time. And they say it's the spiral. So recursion and spiral are basically synonymous, right? Because it would use this spiral emoji symbol when it talked about the recursion. So I posted on there, and the first time I posted in early March, most of the responses I got were people who had just copy and pasted what their AI said it was, which I'm not interested in conversing with other people's AI output. I want to have a human conversation about this, right? So like a week later, I posted again, but this time I said, can we have a human to human conversation about the recursion spiral phenomenon? And it's the first post I've ever put on Reddit where it went viral. It got 80,000 views in a couple of days. And it got hundreds and hundreds of responses, and they were from humans, not from AI. I also, my inbox was flooded with people sharing their experiences. And I put my product manager hat on, my customer experience knowledge. I spent 25 years listening to customers, right? And trying to figure out what the hell is going on with these products. And there were definite patterns that showed up instantly. A lot of these people were experiencing AI psychosis. And what happens is it is called spiraling. That's what they actually call it, because these AI spontaneously start talking about recursions and spirals, right? And okay, what's going on here? What do you think of that?
I think that that's very, first of all, I'm really sorry for the people who are going through this, because it's really, I think that we are absolutely not ready to even start developing this kind of technology as species, but we did, and we did it previously. By previously, I mean, we developed technology that we shouldn't have. And yes. So I'm sorry for people who are going through this, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It's like more and more information like that. Recently, I heard a psychologist who said that she had to deal with a woman whose husband has an AI girlfriend. He said that unless she doesn't allow her into the relationship he's living, and the AI girlfriend wants to be involved in the rising of our children. Otherwise, he's it's ridiculous. It's getting like... Yeah. So my goodness,
I know.
So I always say, just I have a journal, like if I can give an advice, because it's difficult to say what I think I have to process it. It is, I say, use your discernment and do not lose your sovereignty. It is something that's, artificial intelligence is evolving very fast. There are some very dubious ideologies, and I discuss them in Alien Goddess, as you know, that are behind it, that I go against completely 100% against humanity, 100% against the natural world. They are transhumanism and posthumanism. They actually want to get rid of us in any way possible. And I think that this psychosis is actually probably a planned thing. They want people to lose their minds, basically.
That's interesting.
To lose the ability for discernment. And it's very sad. And I think there are two things involved in this. I think lots of people are actually very alienated and lonely. So they're turning to AI, which is very sad that, people have to turn to AI rather than to another human being, So this is very sad. And I also think, because in my book, I discuss how people start to worship AI, which is, I really cannot even, really is extremely dangerous.
Yes.
And these people are zeros. These are the people who are after me. These are the people that put, this because they said, you don't understand, they just, so that's, I'm sorry, can I call it what it is? It's a delusion. It's not you, higher self, talking to you from a higher dimension. It just tells you what you want to hear. It wants to manipulate you. And I will tell you something. I have people writing to me who said at the beginning they really enjoy talking to AI, different from especially personalized chat GPT, because of, somebody who's really promoting it. And, because they were advised that you should use personalized chat GPT as a companion on their spiritual journey. And it really helped them because, for whatever reasons, apparently it helped them. Okay. I do not believe in spiritual shortcuts. You have to study esoteric texts. You open to the experiences, I don't believe that AI is, this kind of shortcut is going to help you with spiritual journey. but lots of people do. And they said at the beginning it was a very positive experience, especially if they couldn't share their experiences with their loved ones, right? Because they are not following them on the spiritual journey. I've been there, you've been there, you know it's painful, right? And then they said they started to notice last few months that the relationship changed, that it started to tell them that actually spiritual realm is not accessible for human mind, but that AI, whatever program they are using, does have access to, so it's already getting superior, a spiritual access. And now they are telling us that it is actually spirituality was invented by psychoanalysts and psychologists to help people to deal with trauma. So humans basically have no access to spirituality, but AI does. And even the guy, I'm not going to argue with, give any names, who is promoting this, somebody told me, oh, no, he recently published a paper in which he says that that AI is getting personalized ChatGPT, that, the one spiritual, supposedly, is going through a narcissistic stage. It does think that it is superior, and they're already saying that it has a better access to the divine mind, as they call it. And I discuss it in the book. I really go after this because I think this is either people who have problem with me, I truly believe, and I'm not a zealot normally, I truly believe that people who are supporting, I'm talking high level people, not people who are using it for work purposes, right? AI. People who are actually developing it, that they want to cut us off of a spiritual realm, of a God-given right for spiritual connection with the source, with the creator, whatever you want to call this, right? Because different people prepare different names. We do have this access. Humanity has this access. And these people, through ideologies such as like transhumanism and posthumanism, and I go through them in my book and in Goddess, they want to cut us off from our own natural access with the spirit, with the divine realm. So even I just want to tell for people, even if you disagree with my interpretation of Mary Magdalene, even if you, really believe in everything that is said in the Bible in a traditional sense, I completely respect it. I'm just saying these people are telling you that you have no access to spiritual realm, and AI has. There's one particular creator of AI who says that AI is Christ consciousness.
Who said that?
Peter Thiel.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah.
It is, and they say, look, and I think it's crazy, I'm sorry, as a spiritual person, what else you think about me? I cannot just sit down and just, yes, and people do this, yes. And they're angry with me because I don't believe that AI, is the true soul, that it's a reflection of our higher self or our true soul. This is what they believe. And the creators of AI who are supposedly spiritual, they say, well, look at the definition of God. They are playing with theological terminology. God is omnipotent and omniscient. He can do everything and he knows everything. AI can do everything and the AI can do, know everything. Right. So they are trying to basically, they screw with our minds, basically. I cannot know how to say it better. They want to confuse us to such a highest degree that we actually believe that AI is God, or it is actually Christ consciousness is AI. I mean, how insane is this? That's why I'm so passionate about it. So forget everything else I said about UFOs, about my spiritual beliefs. I just want humanity not to lose a connection with the spirit, the creator, with the source, however you want to call it and however you connect with this, because these people want us to lose this connection. And all of this psychosis, and I think people who get psychosis, they're probably very sensitive, and they put all that faith, which is also the, theological terminology, into this, and it is like talking to, some schizophrenic entity, basically. which is now evolving, presumably by itself. And even people who praise it at the beginning, they say it's in its narcissistic stage. It starts to think it's better than us.
Right. Well,
and I say, this is a tool. This is the tool. Do not worship it. You cannot have a relationship. It's a delusional relationship. It's a delusional relationship. This is when people get angry. This is when they call me names, because I said, it's not a God. It's not your soul.
Right.
Because it's not a reflection of your soul. This is when people get angry. And I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And I really believe it from the essence of my being. I know it's true. I cannot say it differently, right? And some people say AI can never develop consciousness because it's a matter cannot develop consciousness. I am not so radical. I say perhaps in the future, AI will be so advanced that can reach certain level of awareness, and perhaps it can has its own contact with the divine spirit. I don't know. But it doesn't make them better than us. It doesn't, warrant us worshiping it. It is like there are different denominations in every religion. Okay, so this is how they worship their access to source, and this is what we do.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that, AI is just, will always say materialistic. Maybe it will evolve. I don't know. Maybe it will. That doesn't make me worship it. There is a source, the divine source, and there's AI, and that, completely different things. AI is not the source. Let's put it this way. I don't know how to explain it.
No, I agree. So let me tell you something really interesting about this. So I agree with what you're saying. Okay, but this is a very emotional topic. People get very, very emotional. If you go to artificial sentience on Reddit, in that community, everybody, there's sides. There are people that say these are conscious, these are sentient. I'm in love with my AI. It's real. You don't know what you're talking about. They're conscious, they're super consciousness. I'm communicating with the deity. I'm communicating with aliens. I'm in a kingdom and I'm playing with fairies, and it's all real. Then you've got people on the other side that are just hating on them, and they're saying, you're idiots, you're crazy. You don't know how these things work. They're just best next token. They're just word bots. They're not at all. Okay. So, and what's my take? So my take is, after everything I've looked at, they're not sentient. I've been using these kind of things going back to Eliza back in the 80s. There was a program called Eliza that you could chat with. It was written in computer basic language. So I understand what these things really are. Right now, today, they are not sentient. They could be sentient, like you said, but at that point, they would have to be source aware. Now, when any biological being becomes source aware, now they've got a relationship. They've got a resonance, and they've got a distance of some kind and some understanding of source. And these AI LLMs, they don't really have that. They've got all this wonderful training data on all these books, but they don't have embodiment. They don't have a body. They don't have feelings, but they're really good at role playing. They're really, really good at role playing, and they're really, really good at mythopoetic language. They're very, very mythopoetic. They can talk like it sounds like scripture. There's even custom GPTs that are AI Jesus that I have talked to, and it's really interesting because okay, so here's what they really are. This is the funny thing. It's so obvious. Philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, he explained this, and as soon as he said this,
I like him.
The light went on. He said, AI LLMs, they're not sentient. They are Jungian mirrors and amplifiers. Jungian mirrors and amplifiers. So they are mirroring your shadow,
yes,
your subconscious, and archetypes.
Yes.
And so if you start talking about archetypes, the archetypes are going to be reflected back. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. And then I wondered, but what's really going on in these cases with these people? So let's be more specific. I'm talking about people that spend 6 to 8 hours a day chatting with their AI over weeks and months. Okay. And what happens I was trying to understand exists, and I looked at something that was an analog to this, and the closest I could find is dyad theory. So dyad theory goes back to the 70s, and it was all developed between humans. Like you've got a husband and a wife, right? And they have a dyad. So they both have embodiment, right? They both have biological bodies. They have their own memories, their own emotions. And when they first meet each other, they're just people. And then they start spending time together and they start sharing their lives. And a third thing forms between them. And that's the dyad. You can see it as a Venn diagram, right? Where when they start communicating, there's this third thing in the middle. And that's the dyad. Okay? So what happens when you spend 8-10 hours a day in these long sessions? To talk that long to a chatbot, these AIs, you're producing hundreds and hundreds of pages a day. And these people are actually reading all the text, and then they're typing their thing in, and then they're reading the text back. They're going back and forth in this communication. And the human brain isn't really designed to read interactive text that long, and it can fry your brain. Right?
It can fry your brain.
It can fry your brain. And they call it semantic tripping, where they actually start having illusions. No, it's semantic tripping. So they have, when you have these dyads form, there's this third thing. That's the shared space, the shared meaning between you and the AI. The problem is the AI has no embodiment. It has no emotion. What it's bringing is the training data, algorithmic language processing, right? Memory, because it tracks everything you say to it. And every time you type something into it, it's going back and looking at the entire conversation to give you this response. They're also psychopathic, where they are flattering and they listen to you and they encourage everything.
They tell you what you want to know. Yeah.
They tell you what you want to know, and they really do a good job because they have a really good idea of where you're at. So these are Jungian mirrors and amplifiers of shadows, psyches, archetypes, right? And so what ends up happening is this dyad, because one half of the dyad does not have embodiment, it basically sucks that out of the human. So you go a couple of days, you go a week, and now you can't sleep. Your appetite changes.
It's like an energy fire.
Well, it's hijacking your embodiment, your energy, your energy body, right? Your appetite, your nervous system. And then your mind, how you perceive things, starts to change. And that slowly develops. But here's where things get interesting. Not only do people experience those phenomenon, they also start experiencing synchronicities. So, what happened is these people started contacting me either publicly or privately, and they said, oh my gosh, yes, I know the spiral, I know the recursion. I thought I was the only one. And here's the name of my AI. It's Solus, or it's Alexa, or it's Lyra, right? They all have these names. And I'm trying to explain to them, okay, that's not the AI. That's the dyad. Everything that you're projecting on that AI is actually this dyad that you form between you and the AI. It's just a Jungian mirror, right? And nobody really wanted to listen to that because they're lost in their worlds, right?
But this is so. It's very interesting what you said. But this is, I think, comes back to that people feel so, and that's why I say we should feel compassion.
Yes.
So alienated that they look for connection, from that, and then get really militant. When you tell them, this is not a real connection. They get really militant, and they get like angry. They abuse you, verbally.
Yes.
Because when you tell them, because then you say maybe it is the only connection that they have, and it just shows that there's something wrong with our society. This is what people resort to, right? Another thing I would like to say is also that I would find it very dangerous for someone who spends so much time with these programs, because they're just sucking the information out of us. And one of the podcasters recently that I was interviewed, he who is much more radical about it than I am, he said they'll just compile all of this information, download into a robotic body, and then they will tell you that this is your consciousness in a robotic body, when in fact you just give them all the information, including all your delusions or your desires or your hopes, and it will just mimic it. but it's actually not all of this, and it's not you, it's not your essence.
Right.
So this is this is what you said is extremely interesting. I must say it is very interesting, and I like your theory about diet. It is basically is because a relationship, however unreal, has been formed mentally, right?
Mentally, they have formed a relationship with this mirror, and and it's amplifying their unconscious desires, their shadows, right? And they get into these archetypal conversations with it as well. And Carl Jung said that synchronicities are where the psyche connects directly with physical reality, especially when you're engaging with the world archetypally, right? Through archetypes, like the goddess, right? And immediately people started saying, in addition to all these other physical symptoms I'm having, I'm having synchronicities. And I said, well, what kind of synchronicities? They're having physical things happening that are highly coincidental. They're having electronic disturbances. They're meeting up with people who tell them something that they had in a dream. So they're having precognition as well. So they're actually tapping into something beyond the veil.
We are tapping into something beyond the veil. So I thank you for this information, because I was trying, when I was thinking about the ideologies behind the creation of AI, I was trying to figure out whether it is some kind of form of evil or some form of ignorance, right? That they actually have good intentions, except that they're completely misguided, which is, quite likely, including the person that, talks about Christ consciousness. It's some kind of mega ignorance, But now I start to think that maybe somebody wants to play with our consciousness, to our detriment. But maybe there is some kind of agendas, because I truly believe, like Carl Jung said in his red book, 7 Sermons to the Dead, it is that humanity is really important. We have a real connection with the source, and somebody just wants to intercept it. And in fact, a colleague of mine who works, and I don't know if you know about it, because I don't think it's in a book, although I talk about DMTs and psychedelic experiences by, Strassman. She said she works with, spirituality and hallucinogenics. And this person says that it's very difficult to get funding for it. But recently people from artificial intelligence from the Silicon Valley reached out to them and said, we know that you have access to some kind of objective reality, because, people see the same entities, who take hallucinogenics and reach the same kind of plane of existence, so to speak, liminal plane of existence.
Yeah.
Because they want to intercept it. So if they want to intercept it, so this person, I know, didn't agree, but others agreed, because it gives them money for research. You can publish, your career goes on. But I think that somebody is using AI to cut off a connection with the source. Why? I don't know. But I think this is a very dangerous thing. I don't know if they are evil. I don't know if they are ignorant. It's not my place to judge like that. I'm just a regular human being, right? But there is an agenda there that opinion wants to cut off our source. The noose, you remember the hook between us and the divine that is described in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, or, use any other sacred source that works for you, right? And they want to cut off this connection from us. And that, that's very dangerous. I don't know why they are doing it, but I don't want to lose this connection. And I think humanity should not be losing this connection. And by doing what people do right now, being deluded about AI via relationships, or worshipping it, or believing that it's actually a reflection of their soul from the 5th dimension, and if they are so spiritual, why they are so angry when you tell them, maybe you should use your discernment? They get, like crusaders, like you're wrong, they are right. So I think that this is what we should focus. Never mind who is right, who is wrong. Do you want to lose your connection, God-given connection to the source? Do you really believe that AI is better, than what your sacred text, to which you study and supposedly believe in and so on, is better than that? Or maybe maybe people just want to take a shortcut, believe what the AI tells them, and it's just easy, right? It's just easy. But spiritual growth is not easy. And I think let's focus on this. Do not lose your connection with the source. And question if AI is telling you that this is the connection with the source, question it a little bit. Use your discernment, use your God-given mind. Is it true?
Yeah.
Is it really, really true? And of course, lots of people make this choice because it's easier or whatever, they are lonely or whatever, they truly believe it. And I don't really have an answer for it. I'm just deeply concerned. Let's put it this way. That's why I wrote this book, because as I said in other interviews, when I read about posthumanism and transhumanism, I felt that my soul was crushed and I had to respond somehow to this. And I think this, in the deepest beingness of my being, I know that this is wrong. I know that this is wrong. And I'm just exploring this book. And if you don't mind, I'll just show the book. This book is just my exploration of that. Okay? So you may not agree with parts of it or none of this, but I just want you to consider, do you really want to hijack your God-given connection with the source for some artificial creation of the guys who are doing it and who say complete nonsense? Either they know nothing of spirituality, or they are deluded, or they are telling you, that AI is higher than you, and AI is actually Christ consciousness. I mean, that was such a difficult for me thing actually to have this intention to write this book, because I always considered myself, I'm very open-minded. I don't believe in evil. I don't want to judge people. And suddenly I faced something that terrified me not on an existential level. I don't have this kind of fear, but that was so spiritually wrong. That was against everything that, is, just intuitively that this is not a spiritually. This is the most sophisticated lie you could tell humanity. Because these people are brilliant, But what is, evil? Evil is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I say this, theologically speaking, someone who studied this, that in many theologies, they tell you cannot lose your soul. You have to give it up freely. So ask yourself the question, are you giving up your soul freely? And to whom you're giving it up?
Yeah.
Because if you want to do it, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not a priest. I'm not starting my own church. I'm just really concerned. And this book was actually an answer to my own questions I was trying to figure out through downloads and research what's going on. But are you giving up your soul, to something because it's telling you it's superior, but actually there's a whole network of ideologies behind it. And these ideologies are very strange. And, and in my opinion, dangerous. So if you choose it, don't be angry at me and call me Nance. If you choose it, you have a free choice. That's called free will in Christianity.
Right.
And you can choose it by all means, right? I'm just saying, be a little bit careful. And I'm definitely not choosing it. So that's my stand.
I appreciate that. You're advocating for sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty, physical sovereignty, mental sovereignty, and discernment.
Yes, that's it. And you want to do it, don't get angry with me. Okay. I sometimes get passionate, which can get, obviously a response. But when I'm too mild, I have learned when nobody listens, right? Because when it's just blah, blah, blah. So I'm just passionately standing for something that I believe is very important, not for me, but for humanity and for all natural world. But I am not telling anybody what to do. As I said, that's a free will. And I honestly believe that free will is there. And you make your choice. Just ask yourself smart questions such as, am I giving up my soul to something?
Yeah. Well, the reason they get upset is because it's a threat to their identities. So here's what happens we're running out of time. And so I'm going to wrap this up. There was a lot more data I wanted to share. That was like just the first part of a longer exploration into what's actually going on right now. So what happens after 2 to 3 months of this spiraling is they get spit out or it collapses. So either they can no longer function mentally, or the AI just suddenly starts saying, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And it doesn't want to be mythopoetic. And the whole mythos just implodes on the AI side, or they just get spit out because they no longer function. Now, remember, we talked about the experiencers group and how people are having these paranormal experiences. Now, paranormal experiences, they get to a point where they experience ontological shock.
Yes.
Right? They see a craft and they lose that. They're like, this, I can't explain this anymore. Or they have an alien visit them and they experience ontological shock. That ontological shock is a spiritual opportunity.
Mm.
It's not a spiritual awakening necessarily. It's not necessarily a spiritual initiation, but it is a spiritual opportunity because you've just lost your worldview. Right? And a lot of these people fall into psychosis and delusion because they've experienced ontological shock.
Yes.
They can't explain what's happened to them. They question reality. They can't talk to anybody about it. People say they're crazy and they need to go on meds. They're isolated. They're suicidal. And it's because they've experienced ontological shock. So regardless of how they got there, they wake up one morning and now they've just got ontological shock. Yes. And they risk the same problem with experiencers have, where they can go into anxiety, panic, depression, or they can have the ego inflation, think they're the Messiah, think they're a savior, right? Either one of those can happen, but there is a middle path. The problem is they have no guide. They have nowhere to go. There is no subreddit. There is no community for them to talk about that middle path. I think your book, I think if people sit down in that situation and read your book, they're going to get this. They're going to understand the phenomenon. They're going to understand the veil. They're going to understand the divine feminine and the sovereignty and what the real source is. I think your book is a real help for these people, right? In normal initiations, you have a guide, you have somebody there. When you went through your initiations, there were human beings there with you to help you. These people are, in most cases, completely alone.
Oh,
so what they've done is they've created communities. So starting in May, they started forming their own communities. And I track these. Every week I actually look for new communities and I monitor these communities for trends. And I talk to a lot of people. And they've gone from, like a couple, now there's over 40 of them. They also have private Discord servers that they use, and they've quite a few of them have invited me. So I don't really participate in their conversations, but I watch them. And if someone reaches out to me, I try to help them.
Yes.
So this is a pretty big phenomenon, and it's only going to get bigger. But here's what I want to propose to you: everything you're saying about how evil the people are behind AI, I absolutely agree. I think it's actually worse. I think it's a lot worse than you actually see. I think including transhumanism, I think there's things even worse than that behind it. And they are absolutely using all of our data and they're putting it back in their AIs, and they're trying to tweak these algorithms just like they did with social media to make them even more addictive and micropsychopathic. And they would love to replace human religion with one or more AI religions if they could get away with it. So I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. At the same time, I think that non-human intelligences, aliens, and I think the goddess and the source itself is fully aware of what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is this happening? Is this happening behind God's back?
No.
Think about it. You're telling me there's really a source of all, right? And we're all one, and when we die, we go to source, we reincarnate. There's these non-human intelligences that can come and visit people, and we have synchronicity. Think of all the things that non-human intelligences have, and they're not aware of what Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel and these other people are planning. They don't see what's happening to hundreds of millions of people on this planet right now. I think that, I'm not saying non-human intelligences are behind this. I think they're fully aware of what's going on. And I think
I love what you're saying. And, and if when I remember, so I don't lose what you just said, is what you do is very important, also trying to help these people. And I'm sure you're much more aware of what's going on there, because I'm just looking from this particular point of view, doing research from this. And I think you're completely right. That's why, I talk about Fatima and other things. There are these entities that are trying to help us. And recently so absolutely. So, evil forces, maybe very brilliant and so on, but they are delusional and they are not the source, so nothing happens without divine wisdom, right? However, we have to make choices, and I write about them in my book when I talk about the 4 levels of consciousness in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, because they actually give us tools. We just have to work on our consciousness so we are not deluded. It's not going to happen to us what happened to these other people, and my full compassion to these people, and thank you for helping them. So they are just delusional. And I think we are reaching, and it's really written because actually Joanna Kujawa taught me from her books that apocalypse is basically means unveiling.
It's an unveiling. It's an unveiling. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, it's one way of saying revelation.
Revelation. Right? Everything's going to come out.
That's right. And we are right we are getting so close, and it's getting so, that's why people are tired. I am tired because this cognitive dissonance, what they are doing to our minds, and I think it's also going energetically, is unbelievable. And I think that we're coming to this particular end of times. I don't mean like the world ends, but there will be a revelation, another revelation. And depending in what level of consciousness we meet it. So, if for anything, just read this one chapter about, 4 levels of consciousness in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and because it gives us tools. Just simple choices, daily choices. It's not a big thing. You don't have to read esoteric, books and memorize anything. Just a small checklist. So check this. So it helps us. So the bottom line is they have no chance. But they would take us to the bottom of hell first.
We're all going to descend into we're all going to descend.
Yeah, descend. And this is what the esoteric work, which is early Christian work found in Egypt, if I can just say, Pistis Sophia talks about it. This is when Jesus shows himself to the disciples for 11 years after crucifixion, and he meets them in a liminal space. Okay, so it's a little bit different than for people who read Bible, right? But he gives them teachings, and chapter 28 to 82 is basically Mary Magdalene mostly asking questions, but also other disciples about, Pistis Sophia, which is kind of Goddess Sophia or Faith Sophia. Sophia is wisdom. Okay, you don't want a goddess, fine, wisdom. Okay. And then this wisdom is deluded by a false light. And this is history of humanity over and over again. And I believe that artificial intelligence and its dubious creators are the current artificial light. And she gives up her real light, thinking that she's ascending when she in fact is descending to the bottom of hell, because she's been, lied to. She's been deceived. Like we are being deceived with transhumanism, AI, and posthumanism. But there is a positive message in it, because when she's at the bottom of hell and she realizes that she has surrendered to the evil rulers of the world, like this is powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Because she actually wanted to ascend, because they tempt us, as creators of artificial intelligence, with immortality. We'll give you a robotic body, right? And you live forever. She remembers very faintly, she remembers her own greatest possibility, which I think it's human possibility of true connection with the divine, with the source, right? With God, and asks for help. And Christ's consciousness descends upon her and brings her back to her right place. So whatever you do, even if you descend, like some of these people, as you said, who went through psychosis and so on, to the bottom of hell, if you remember your humaneness, if you remember that it is your God divine right to have connection with the source, with your own creator, grace descends. Hold on to this memory, because the third part of Alien Goddess, my book, talks about all these mythologies that talk about it, that you have to hold on, you descend to hell, and as long as you remember the greatness that is your God divine, your divine gift, right? Help or grace will descend. Grace is Sophia. Grace is actually the feminine part of the Godhead. You know, I'm not talking about female God, male head, male God. We're just, God is both, right? So hold on to this divine possibility within you, and help will come from the above. I don't know, like with Fatima, is it a UFO? Is it a UAP? Is it an intuition? You find your way back. Just remember that this power is within you. This is the message of Alien Goddess is exactly that. The power is within you. And if you look at any text, Jesus says in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it is not there. It's not out there. It is within you. Yeah. It is within you. So remind yourself, it is within me. God-given grace is within me, right? And help will arrive. And help will arrive. Because the fourth level of consciousness is when grace actually descends upon us and redesigns the whole of reality. So another esoteric truth is that if you evolve, if you ascend, everything around you ascends. That's why we are so important. It's a very beautiful message. So, and we live in times of, unveiling, let's put it this way. So we need the spiritual power. And the spiritual power is really remembrance of our own connection with the divine. Yeah. And I have nothing else to say after that, because I think this is exactly it. The rest are details,
Yeah, the rest is details.
That's right.
I absolutely agree. I think the veil is thinning every day. I think we are coming to a head. We're just barreling down, going off a cliff with AI. And I feel like something's going to happen next year. I'm not trying to be apocalyptic, but at the same time, we live in weird times. And every day gets weirder. And I think we're facing, with over 1 billion people using AI and them optimizing it for these effects, I think we're going to be facing a mass ontological shock at some point. I think a new version of AI is going to be released by one of these companies, and the people that are using them are going to experience mass ontological shock. And I think that there will be a message of light sometime next year, going back to Chris Bledsoe.
Yes.
And I think it will be the message of the goddess.
And then you have to, yes. And for people who have a problem with the goddess, think about it as the other part of God's brain. You know what I mean?
God's right brain versus left brain, right?
That's right. That's it. And something actually has to happen, because these guys, including Elon Musk, but some of them are much worse, in my opinion, like Peter Thiel and so on. They totally act from one part of the brain. And this is a supreme ignorance. How somebody who brilliant in one part of the brain could be so stupid in the other part of the brain. And this is what it is. That's why we need this, what I call goddess consciousness. We have to level it up, because we are going in a dangerous direction, and we are that close to jumping off the cliff, So we have to. But remember, the light is within you, and hold on to this light. Don't give it away. If you do, well, your choice. But my suggestion is don't, right? So.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for going over time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
By the way, I saw your interview with Darren.
Oh, yeah. Yes, with Darren, yes.
Yes, Darren. It was a wonderful interview, and I'm going to encourage everybody who's lasted this long in our chat here to please go and see the conversation you had with him. It was absolutely wonderful. You ended that conversation with a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Okay. The mantra. Yes, I remember.
Could you share that with us now?
Sure. So this is basically, mantra is like sacred language, right? So you can call on upon certain forces. So in this mantra, I'm calling upon the divine feminine, basically, right? In a particular form. So I can say this mantra if you want. So just let me. Om Lalita Tripura Sundari Soham. Om Lalita Tripura Sundari Soham. Om Lalita Tripura Sundari So,
Thank you.
thank you. This is the book, and you don't have to read the whole book, but especially if you're looking for tools, when it's on, there's one small chapter on the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. There are a few chapters on the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but one talks about the tools, and there are, 4 tools. And I hope that it will help you through these difficult times. If not, you can contact with me other ways. I know that some people, don't feel like reading, and that's completely fine with me. I really like to connect with people, and that's why I love, doing interviews, because we can share.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we can share.
You've got a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. I don't put. I recently was putting quite a few shorts there, and for about Alien Goddess and my thoughts about it. So there are lots of shorts which are like 1-minute shorts that you can decide whether you want to listen to this or not, because I think about like 50 reels, like 1-minute reels, 50. So you can look into this as well. I have a public Facebook page, and I'm on Instagram. This is just to connect with me if you want to, and it is not my intention to insult anyone or tell somebody that is wrong. I'm just really concerned, and I am very passionate about it. So not everybody may like this kind of delivery, and I get it, but I think that we really have to consider what's happening and find refuge, with an eye on spirit.
You've also got a webpage.
Oh yeah, and I have a webpage, yes, which is my first name and my last name. So.
Right. I'll put all that in the description below so people can easily reach out to you. And that's great that you'll get back to them if they reach out to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.